I'm Angela Kennecke, and welcome to Grieving Out Loud.
Shifting from a moral failing to a disease is still happening. And it just blows my mind when I run into somebody who said, it's their fault. It's their choice. It's, we can't change it. We can't fix it. I'm a believer that we can. I mean, I've witnessed it. I've seen it. I have members in my family who have been free of opioids for 20 years in recovery.
You may recognize Mary Bono as the widow of Sonny Bono, who filled his seat in Congress and then went on to serve nearly 15 years as a California representative. Mary was on the forefront, warning about the opioid epidemic in the early 2000s. Mary is now a tireless advocate as chairman of the board of Community Anti-Drug Coalitions of America, as well as chairman and CEO for Mothers Against Prescription Drug Abuse and a board member for SAFE Project, as well as a board member for Verde Technologies of Minneapolis, which created the Deterra drug deactivation and disposal system. She is married to former astronaut Admiral Steve Oswald. Our conversation ranged from reducing stigma to what Congress can do to the need for more infrastructure and unity when it comes to ending the overdose epidemic. Well, Mary, thank you so much for joining me today and for all the advocacy work you are doing in this area, trying to save lives in this horrible epidemic that we're facing. Thank you so much.
Thank you for what you're doing. It's a labor of love.
Yes,
pain, angst, and love.
Right. I say I'm so grateful for all the skills that I have that I learned throughout the course of my career and my life, that I'm able to do this, but I hate it that I have to do it. I mean, I feel compelled to do it. It's just like, I wish I didn't have to, but I do. So here we are.
Well, I think parents like you realize how great the pain is and how unnecessary the loss is, or the loss was. And I think sounding the alarm and raising the awareness is one of the greatest things we can do. So I applaud you for channeling your grief into action and what you're doing. And, I think you're going to make a difference. I've been at this a long time, though. I started doing opioid work in about 2007, 2008. And, I can't believe we're where we are today, and that it still seems to be getting worse before it's getting better.
Right. Back then, hardly anybody was even talking about it, really. So you were on the forefront there.
I was. And when I was in Congress, I joined quickly ranks with Congressman Hal Rogers, who represents Eastern Kentucky. And his district was very hard hit. But I was, as a member of Congress from Southern California, it was somebody else's problem. It was over there. It was in Florida. It was in Appalachia. And then suddenly it was in Southern California with a vengeance. And this was long before the fentanyl crisis. This was when prescription opioids were the drug of choice, and more young kids were getting their hands on these drugs. And, not only that, they thought they were partying with safe drugs because they came in a little brown bottle with some doctor's name on the label. And it was, I was quickly seeing way too many overdose deaths. It was before Narcan was really on the scene to revive a bunch of folks, but we didn't have like Good Samaritan laws then. Somebody was overdosing and people would just drop their friend off on the curb and let him die, or drop him outside of a hospital. I mean, we've come a long way with things like Good Samaritan laws, but unfortunately fentanyl has just changed the game, and so much for the worse.
Right. It is so disheartening because you think about that. Yes, we have Narcan, we have Good Samaritan laws, but yet we're at a record number again of overdose deaths. I think more than 105,000 people died in the last 1 year period of the data that's available. And do you think, as a former member of Congress, do you think we can legislate our way out of this? I mean, obviously, I feel like this is so many elements. It's such a complicated problem.
Legislation has to be a part of it, no doubt, on all levels, federal, state, local. There's a lot that has to be done. For example, the fact that we have to continually chase the bad guys who are producing fentanyl because they changed the analog. They changed the molecule, and so therefore it changes the game with law enforcement. examples like that are one place where, of course, we have to legislate and pass good legislation. In Colorado, there was some unintended consequences on the amount of fentanyl you could carry before it would be illegal. And they chose a dose that it's a lethal dose. So they're trying to rewrite and fix that mistake that they made, but it's a little bit complicated. But but look, it's everything. It's all hands on deck. It's legislation, it's funding, it's awareness, it's nonprofit work, it's at the family level, you name it. It's everybody needs to talk about this. And the scariest thing, and I know you know this, but with fentanyl is it's in every illicit pill. Practically, and kids don't know an illicit pill from a non-illicit, and whether they think they're taking Adderall or doing something like cocaine, it's most likely laced. And look, when I'm 60, so when I was a kid, things were a little bit different, but we would get in trouble. You drink a beer or two, or maybe take that shot of tequila or whatever you did as a kid, but you had time to recover from that by having a massive hangover and all of those things. And hopefully learn your lesson. But with fentanyl, there's no opportunity to learn.
I always say that we cannot even allow for experimentation anymore. It's just, we know enough about substance use disorder and the brain that, parents can't just think that's a rite of passage. Oh, I maybe smoked some weed when I was young, or I did this or that, but it's not the same.
You're right. It definitely needs a change in thinking here. And look, I'm a primary prevention person, first and foremost, to your point. We have to tell people, don't even do it. And I know a lot of people, the harm reductionists, are saying, well, let's just get the fentanyl test strips out there and everybody let them test their drugs. I don't know. That's like saying, go ahead and crash your car, but wear your seatbelt, you're fine. It's better to avoid this. And like, I personally have seen so much devastation from substance use disorders in my family on both sides. Why I wouldn't be terrified of anybody experimenting to begin with, because I've seen nothing but pain and suffering coming out of it. So that's where my heart personally is. I respect everybody who comes at it from the harm reduction perspective. And that's their thing. Mine is more about, like you said, just trying to prevent it in the first place.
Right. I think prevention is the key, because as you probably know, in recovery is so hard. I mean, there are relapses, and relapses can be deadly. I do think fentanyl strips, if you're addicted and you're trying, to get help, or you're unable to get off of the substances, that's probably where those are important.
They're very important. I mean, don't get me wrong, they are important. And I'm glad there are people out there talking about it. But for me, for my efforts, and we all have so much sort of limited bandwidth, I tend to put more of my emphasis in the primary prevention, because that's where I started. But I'm very thankful people are out there doing harm reduction and doing things like this.
A few weeks ago, the House Ways and Means Committee heard Emily's story along with other family stories of loss. And each one of them, and I'm telling you this because I'm thinking of you, being in Congress, and obviously you're still connected to Congress. Each one of them had a personal connection. They had somebody in their family who had overdosed, not necessarily always died. One of the congressmen talked about his own struggles with substance use disorder. And I just thought this is really interesting how maybe it takes all of this permeation to reach a tipping point where we can finally turn the tide.
Well, I know it's something you've talked about, and that's stigma and addressing stigma. The old school thought was, whether it's alcoholism or, an OUD or any sort of disorder, use disorder, it was a moral failing. It was considered a moral failing. And it was a choice and a bad choice. And it was treated that way. And people who are suffering with this disease were treated like criminals and like lesser thans. And we've had to change, and we're still changing. We run into that stigma. I'm sure you do too. Every day on, well, it's a choice. It's like nobody chooses to be addicted. Come on. It is a disease, but you say recovery is tough, but it is possible. And one of the thrusts of the nonprofit that I work with, Mothers Against Prescription Drug Abuse, is we're trying to celebrate people in recovery. I've always been frustrated. There are walks on the mall in Washington, D.C. And for, let's say, and God bless it, it's such a great thing, but Race for the Cure. There are thousands and thousands of people turn out. But we've never had this huge turnout to celebrate people in recovery, to say, God, we applaud you. We're here for you. We want to support you. And we're so proud of you. And so that's sort of my thing on stigma reduction is people in recovery need our support, our appreciation, and they need our help. So that's one of the things I'm passionate about.
How do you think we go about creating major, maybe institutional shifts in this country? I'm thinking about the judicial system, the medical system, just access to treatment, having treatment be part of the medical system, not making addiction a crime. Getting people help within prison systems. That doesn't happen in my state. And I know not all these are federal issues. Some of these are state by state issues, but it seems to me like we have to sort of turn everything upside down to really get a handle on ending overdose deaths.
You're right. You're 100% right. And back to the Ways and Means hearing, and that members are now talking about their personal experiences, whether they've suffered from SUD or have a loved one. It's coming out of the shadows, and that's helpful. But, as far as recovery, rehab in the past was a case of the have and the have-nots. If your family could afford $1,000 a day to send you to a rehab facility for 30 days, you're lucky. And if you fell through the cracks entirely, Lord only knows what could happen. Either you could be helped, or you're just falling through the cracks. But look, for the middle class and most people, it's like, who can afford $1,000 a day? It's ridiculous. No parent should have to bankrupt themselves to get their child the help that they need. So I think we're working hard. We're seeing a lot of change in this respect. We're seeing access to treatment is a lot easier. I think the big question now is access to good treatment is sort of a question. I know that Something Safe Project has a terrific treatment locator tool that they've just released. So parents can go to their website, or somebody looking for help, go to their website and sort of quantify how good a treatment facility is that they might be looking at. So that's important too. But again, the sea change on shifting from a moral failing to a disease is still happening. And it just blows my mind when I run into somebody who said, it's their fault. It's their choice. It's, we can't change it. We can't fix it. I'm a believer that we can. I mean, I've witnessed it. I've seen it. I have members in my family who have been free of opioids for 20 years in recovery. And so but I believe it's tough. That's why we have to support folks who do it. But the other thing is a warm handoff. Let's say somebody overdoses and is revived with Narcan. How do we get them from that into treatment? So it's a warm handoff, sort of from ER or from a police visit into treatment. And
that's what I found in my community is that people overdose, they go to the ER, and then they just leave. And so I'm like, well, why aren't we getting those people immediately into treatment? But we're not. It was something I brought to actually one of our health systems attentions recently. And they're like, no, you're right. I thought we were, but we're not. And so I think they're working on that, but there's just so many places for people to kind of fall through the cracks.
There are. And, then some people will point out, well, somebody's revived, they go to ER, and most likely within 9 months, they're going to be dead. I've heard that. I don't know if that's true or not, but it proves that we have our work cut out for us to make sure that this works. The difficulty with treatment and rehab and recovery is that, and I've seen it again in my own family, that that you cannot force somebody into sobriety. You cannot yell at them enough. You can't nag them. You can't steal their stash. They have to want it themselves. And that's a difficult truth here. You can't send somebody, because I've known folks who've gone into, 30-day inpatient treatment, and the whole time they're there, they're plotting, as soon as I'm out, I'm going to use. They feel that they can use, again, my family member, I'm speaking for them specifically. I don't know that it's everybody, but they think that they might, in my case, the family member thought, well, I can get out and I can use just below the threshold of getting in trouble. It wasn't until the second visit to rehab or inpatient stay that the light bulb is going off. It's like, now I guess they really mean it when they say no, and Thank God there's things like, MAT, medication assisted treatment, to help folks. And I think medically, we've made a lot of great advancements in how to treat again, but MAT works for opioids. We don't have it for people who are addicted necessarily to whole methamphetamine. There are whole, and so we've got to, as we focus on changes in treatment and prevention, we've got to realize that it is not a one size fits all approach to everybody, to everything, and make sure that we don't set somebody else back because we're making some advancements specific to like OUD. It's got to be a whole holistic treatment paradigm in this country that works.
So much of all this comes down to money, right? Like overhauling complete systems is expensive. Getting people treatment is expensive. Insurance companies dictate a lot of, how long they can stay and what kind of treatment they can get. And it all seems to come down to money. But when I look at the big picture of it, I have a big poster that we put up at events, just of local people who have overdosed and died, all young. I mean, obviously the life expectancy is lower in this country now because of this. As you know, it's the number one killer of young people right now. And I look at all that lost potential in all of those people. And I think, well, there's money right there. How can we afford to lose all of the potential of all of those people who are dying every single day? And I don't know how we, really get the funds and the money that it takes to do some of these things.
It's my observation in the past 6 years or so, the money has been there on the federal level, and the federal government is sending money out to the states and counties, but the infrastructure isn't there. So it's like your parents giving you money to go buy a car, but there's no car in the lot to buy. It's like, okay, great, now what? And this is the change that we need. Look, we've treated mental health altogether inadequately. We've ignored it. We've swept it under the rug. And this is the thing, we need to build a lasting system that works. So it's not necessarily getting the money appropriated and funded. It's that we've got to build what we need to have. And so that we just can't shove it out to programs that don't exist. We need to build this. And again, every once in a while, especially in some areas of the country, we run into that stigma or the denial, and it makes it a little bit harder. But I'm glad to say that there's tremendous bipartisan support, tremendous bipartisan work going on in the Congress about getting funding out there and addressing the problem. But again, the federal government can't overrun, the communities, the counties, the state efforts if there is no infrastructure there. So we have to be patient. But there's a whole bunch we can do in the meantime. Look, fentanyl is coming over our borders, and Admiral Winnefeld probably talked about this from his work on the Synthetic Opioid Commission. It is coming over borders. It's coming from China. The precursors are coming from Mexico. I mean, and these are narco traffickers. So at the same time, while we're trying to build our infrastructure, which is lasting, it's not, we're not looking like a COVID temporary 5-year problem. We're looking at forever. I hate to say it. But as we're building that, we do need to be addressing law enforcement, addressing what's happening, addressing the flood of fentanyl that's coming over our borders. So at the same time, it's not the war on drugs, which I know people are critical of, but how we can allow bad guys. And if you've seen what a fentanyl laboratory, if you want to call that, but a fentanyl manufacturer, if you want to see what their camps look like, and to think that it's terrifying that people are putting this stuff into their body, just Google it. Yeah. So it's, we have to focus too on taking out the bad guys who are basically trafficking in death.
Yeah, it's so interesting to me because while China is not outright selling fentanyl anymore to Mexico, they're selling all the raw ingredients, right? And you can just get those online. They make the fentanyl mostly in Mexico, although I have had the DEA tell me they're seeing fentanyl labs pop up in storage units and garages around the US more and more all the time. And I often ask these law enforcement people, why do they want to kill their customer? Why do these dealers? And they're just well, they don't care. The line's out the door. So, I mean, obviously it's just such a complicated problem because we have to address why people are using in the first place. Yeah. The pandemic made it so much worse. And then we have to stop this somehow. And it's not when we say it's coming over through the borders yes, but I mean, it's also coming on planes and ships and through the mail and everything else.
Well, you're right. It's a vicious cycle. I mean, we need demand reduction. We need people to quit seeking this stuff out, and we need to go after the bad guys, or it's a whole continuum of a problem. And again, I think that there's tremendous bipartisan support for this. And I'm very encouraged by that. When I started the work, it's amazing, Angela. When I started the work in 2007, 2008, people were fighting me because I would have a hearing. I didn't have my hearings until about 2011 when I became chairman of a committee. But prior to that, I would slide over stories to my colleagues about people dying of an opioid overdose, basically prescription pills at the time. My colleagues would take the story and slide it away. And I can tell you this, every time I would talk about this, my colleagues would be visited by pharma, and they would be told, oh, I was wrong. And this really isn't a problem. I mean, we know, look from the lawsuits that are being settled around the country, it's because this is what they were fighting it for so long. They were complicit in it. We all know this. Don't get me started. This is what makes me so mad is that we have a Controlled Substances Act. We have at least 15 different federal agencies with some role to play in the drug supply. And they turned a blind eye to this for so long. And in my view, look, OxyContin is what unleashed the whole opioid epidemic, and Purdue Pharma specifically. And the natural course of this, as we know, as we cramp down on the supply of prescription pills, legitimate pills to folks, they move to heroin. And then the fentanyl issue is just the bad guys figuring out how to take advantage of the situation. But it was frustrating to me because back then it wasn't a bipartisan issue. It was basically the handful of us who were already, enmeshed in this work versus all of the people getting money from pharma.
Right. And you were ahead of
that didn't know party lines. That was bipartisan opposition to the work we were trying to do.
Again, it comes down to money and who's in power, who's in control, right? And who has the money. And I just think you were ahead of your time, and how frustrating how many people have died, since you started this work in 2007. And I just think how many families I've had to deal with, my family has dealt with. And I mean, it's just so preventable, all of it.
At times I've felt personal failure about that. Yeah, and the weirdest story is that I was on Admiral Winnefeld's ship. He was the skipper of the USS Enterprise just before 9/11. And I was at sea with him, taking a tour as a member of Congress would do, and visiting with him, talking about all things military. Then a month or two later, 9/11 hit us. But my son was on the boat with me. He was 9. I forget. He was young. And so Admiral Winnefeld and his wife, Mary, our paths crossed then. And then fast forward to, when their son Jonathan died. My husband's also a Navy admiral. And so it's a small, tight-knit community. But when Admiral Winnefeld lost his son, I had forgotten that I'd met him. But I reached out to say, hey, I'm sorry, pardon the intrusion. And but I've been doing this work and I would love to visit with you on some solutions. And he wrote back almost, within, very quickly, Mary, we met when I was a skipper of the Enterprise. And to your point, I'm going, so between our when he and I first met, my family ran into trouble, ran into the opioid epidemic, hit us square in the face. And then years after that, Admiral Winnefeld lost their son. And I think about this, the irony that we had met under different auspices entirely, and that both of our families were hit so hard. And that serves me a lot. It's like, what could we have done to prevent Jonathan's death? Any event, I'm going down sort of my own philosophical rat hole here, but
no, but I totally get it. Admiral, and you can listen to Admiral Winnefeld and his story on my podcast. It's episode 57, just for our audience out there. If you want to go back and listen to it, he's amazing at what he and his family and his nonprofit have been doing. And you're part of that. I know are fantastic. And I love partnering with people like that too. I mean, obviously he and I totally get where, and I'm so grateful you didn't lose your family member. Thank God. But I get what you're saying, because right after Emily died, I wanted to save every parent from going through this. And then I would hear about an overdose in my community and I would just feel like I failed. I can't, but I now realize that both you and I are helping in ways maybe we don't even know. We are saving lives, but it's just such a uphill battle at this point. We can't have that complete transformation like we'd like to see.
I hate to feel defeatist here because I know it's still a labor of love for me, a passion that I don't know why I do so much of it. It's all I focus on pretty much. I mean, in my professional life, in my nonprofit world, serving on 3 boards in this, and then I'm on a corporate board for a company, that is terrific. They have, it's actually a really important technology and people are missing this, but they have a drug disposal and deactivation technology. So people with leftover pills in their medicine chest can safely and environmentally friendly way dispose of excess and unwanted pills.
They put it in a packet, right? Is that the thing they put in a packet and then they can just throw it away then? Is that what that is?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that.
And it's environmentally friendly. The packet is made from a sugar cane product. I joke that it's cotton candy. But what's amazing about it, what we need to tell people is it works on fentanyl. It works on illicit pills. So if anybody finds some pills in their house that don't belong there, get rid of them. And by the way, don't flush them. You're flushing a very deadly toxic drug down into, so, the FDA is not talking about this yet, nor is the DEA. They're talking about it, but they're not talking to do with it when you find it. And it's so strange. A couple of days ago, my husband and I were on a hike, and there's a man off to the side with his dog, and the dog has found a bag of white powder. And the man said, I have no idea what this is. It's very suspicious to me, and I'm afraid because my dog just bit into it. And his awareness, he definitely knew this could be something very dangerous, and so I'm glad to see that he just didn't pick it up and, oh, what is this? He was sort of cautious about it. But disposing of these drugs, whether they're again leftover, pills from surgery or an elderly parent, or whether it looks like it's illicit pill, we need to figure out how to get rid of them quickly and safely.
I wanted to ask about your family member who struggled. How are they doing today? And what was it, do you think, that helped them get into recovery and then stay there?
First of all, it is sort of, you alluded to it earlier. It's a daily process, fighting for recovery, and it's a daily thing. But my family member is doing very well now. And things are looking good. And I was lucky my outcome was so different than yours, but it wasn't without years and years and years of hard work. And for me, I was the daughter of a teaching physician. My dad was professor of ear, nose, and throat at LA County USC Medical Center. And he taught me at a very, very, very young age that addiction and alcoholism are diseases. He was way, way, way ahead of his time. Because of that, that's the way I've always viewed it. I've had addiction and alcoholism in my family long before then. So again, I'd witnessed it as a small child. So, but being taught that by an esteemed professor of medicine at a young age, so I've always viewed it through that lens. And then my father was very helpful in helping to manage, my family member who is addicted, as far as how to love them, support them. But for me, look, there were times when I think the family hit bottom, but we never waited for a family member to hit bottom before we tried to seek treatment. And I will tell you, for me personally, the greatest thing I ever had was a great therapist. Now, I don't know how many people are going to scream that from the rooftops. I had a great therapist, but I did. And I sought him out after my husband's death, my first husband, Sonny Bono, who died in a skiing accident. So I sought out therapy after that for myself and my children, who were 6 and 9 at the time. So we had already had the right person online. And it turns out that he was also a part-time counselor at the Betty Ford Center.
So you did have someone with the right knowledge. Yeah,
I did. And if it weren't for him, I think that our family saga would have lingered a lot longer. And that was hugely important. So I always say to parents and family members, find a professional. This isn't a disease like cancer or you name it, asthma, diabetes. This is so different. It doesn't work the same. It's the one disease that I'm aware of that the body and the brain fight you as you try to get better.
It's a denial, and yeah. right?
It's denial. It's a chemical dependency. It's a mental dependency.
Right.
And you need somebody who's been through it and can help you walk through the steps on what to do, how to do it, and when to do it. So I say to people, get the right therapist on your side with you, working with you day to day.
That was the thing. I felt so alone, because I had struggled. Emily had started rebelling as a young teenager. And hey, I'm a journalist, I'm a researcher. I know how to find out things. And I just looking for solutions, trying all these different things that didn't work. And to me, and it's also, I was a public figure in my community. I'm embarrassed because of the shame and stigma that goes along with this. Like I've somehow failed as a mother because my child is doing this. And I really think that families need so much more support. A good therapist, yes, I agree, but also just easier ways to navigate, to find that support. And I did drag Emily to counselor after counselor because I couldn't find the right one for her. I had my own who was very helpful, but I couldn't find the right one for her who could really, help us with this issue. And I just saw where it was headed. I often talk about trying to stop a freight train, and it just ran me over. I have another friend who compares it to being caught up in a tornado. It is, and this, but I mean, it is so hard for families and it's hard to know where to turn.
It really is. And again, especially with the amount of money that's being sent out now throughout the country to address the problem, as we've seen a lot of fraudulent facilities have been stood up, a lot of bad actors who are trying to take advantage. So the treatment locators, both Safe Project and Shatterproof, have resources to help people and word of mouth. But I think that if you're looking for a counselor outside of a treatment center, maybe they should be affiliated with one. So that they're actually sort of have been vetted and know what they're doing. But look, first of all, I wish I could give you a hug through the Zoom camera.
Thank you.
And I know that's not the solution, but it's how I feel. Because it is what we deal with. It took me so long to get over that feeling of I failed as a mom, or I wasn't there, right? I was an absent mom because I was in Congress, or all of these things. And finally, both of my kids said to me, Mom, you're not making it any better by saying that. You're not. And so that was a little epiphany for me. But again, it is the natural feeling. These are your children, for God's sakes. But, let's pivot to, this isn't something that only affects mothers and fathers. It's affecting children. We've seen footage of children in stores watching their parents overdose in the aisle, and it's everywhere. And I think getting the right support, regardless of the situation, there are a lot of resources for family members, for children, for adult children, but the small children, they definitely are falling through the cracks until it's a public, incident where people have seen it rather than it happening behind closed doors. So it's not, I don't know. And I think Admiral Winnefeld, you look at somebody as powerful as Admiral Winnefeld, my God, and it happened to his family. This is the thing, it's happening to everybody. And that's why our work is so important, and the work to support other parents, because there's definitely a group component here to helping each other heal as parents that I think is essential.
Well, and I've been told, I often think, instead of thinking, why me, why not me? It could happen to anybody. And I'm often told by other mothers, and there's thousands and thousands of us now who listen to this podcast. It helps me so much just to know I'm not alone, just to know that all these things you talk about, I'm not alone. I felt so alone, but I'm not. And I think people are starting to realize that just because of the sheer magnitude of this epidemic.
It's unfortunate, but again, you're right. And, I think back to legislation on something else that needs to be addressed, or what the social media platforms do that allow our children to get access to these drugs. And there are efforts underway in Congress and bipartisan efforts to bring social media companies, into this fight. And there are efforts to give parents the tools they need to sort of monitor their children's social media presence, not in a creepy way like a parent is spying on their children, but a thoughtful way that just would identify like a keyword. There is a company out there, I'm not affiliated with it, but I'm a fan of it. It's called Bark. Their website is bark.us. And they have a technology that allows parents, again, to sign up to have this. It's basically, AI or machine learning, I believe, that identifies a target word. And when you see that they've been able to intervene not only on illicit drug buys and dealers, preying on our children, that they've also been able to work with suicide and bullying. So there is some pending legislation, fingers crossed, that brings the social media companies, and many of them are already signed up to be a part of this. A couple of them are not, and they need pressure. And again, there are ongoing negotiations to bring these companies into the fight to allow parents to have the tools. But we're still fighting others who feel that the best tool for them to sell their technology is to make sure that the conversations of the children are protected from the parents. So
children aren't allowed a right to privacy, if you ask me, because you're responsible for them. So, especially when it comes to social media. And we all know that kids can order a pill off Snapchat and have it delivered to their door, right? I mean, this is happening every day. And so why wouldn't we do something to enable parents to have more control?
Exactly. So, I think that's some positive development that's happening there. Again, the awareness, but it's almost like whack-a-mole, right? So we've moved from the Chinese mailing the stuff in. Now we've moved to, kids getting, and they're being preyed upon by dealers. So we're chasing this next thing. But the thing is, wherever we have to go, we need, whatever we have to chase, we need to do it. We can't let up our guard. The bad guys are always a step ahead of the good guys, always.
Right.
And we need to just chase down every little weakness or vulnerability that we create for our kids.
And there truly is power in numbers, because I think the more that those of us working in this area can band together and can share resources and can promote one another and talk about ideas, and I think the better. I mean, really.
That's sort of been the ethos that we've had at CADCA and Safe Project and MAPTA and Shatterproof to a degree, is that we're stronger together. Where do we, what I don't like is seeing duplication in efforts and programs, and one nonprofit will do a webinar one week and another nonprofit will do the same webinar the next week. It's like, why don't you join together? And let's work together. To your point, I mean, we're stronger together as an army on this than we are everybody having their own individual siloed efforts. To a degree, I think that people are actually providing services out in the community. That's so awesome. But as far as when we can get together and advocate as one large voice, there's great power in that.
Exactly. Well, on that note, we will end this conversation. Thank you so much for your time today.
Hey, thank you. I'm a phone call or an email away for you, for your efforts. Anything you ever do where I can help or our resources can be helpful, consider us your cousin in this fight together with you. And God bless you for what you're doing, and keep up your great work.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the latest episode of Grieving Out Loud. Connect with us online at emilyshope.foundation. And if you're enjoying the podcast, please consider giving us a positive review. Until next time, wishing you faith, hope, and courage.